So, now we are going to start the 6th module of knowledge management, and this module actually talks about that how we are going to draw certain inferences from the data. So, now once you have a knowledge management system and the data is there in the warehouse or it is in the repositories, now the major problem is that how we are going to make use of data and then draw certain inference in terms of patterns or recognizing the data and then getting some value out of this data, so that you can make use of it, right. And then we also discuss some of the techniques, and one of the major technique that is used is data mining, and finally we will see that how we can use knowledge portals for dissemination of the information and other kind of things. So, this module basically talks about 3 things. And this week we are going to talk about inferences from data, that how we are going to learn from the data. We are going to discuss a lot of issues related to data mining and then knowledge portals. Moving to the first part, that is learning from the data. So, we will try to understand what is learning, then how we go about visualizing the data in different forms. It could be in graphic forms and pictorial forms, or it could be in different forms. Then we will also discuss about neural networks as learning models, and then we will also talk about some of the rules, okay, which are used for identifying patterns from the data, and then we will see that how we go about classifying data, developing trees for decision making process, and what are the implications for knowledge management, right. So, these are the topics that we are going to cover in learning from data. Now, when we are going to talk about learning as such, so we have to define what is learning. Okay. See, in layman terms, if you look at learning, it is defined as something that changes our behavior. Okay. So, if you are going to learn something, it is going to help you to behave in a different way. Okay. So, learning is a process through which we are going to change and transform our behavior, and that happens either due to practice or rehearsal, right. That is the general definition that we can give for learning. So, the basic objective of learning is to make changes in the behavior. Now, when we are talking about learning in terms of knowledge management. So, what is the learning in case of knowledge management? That what you have learned from the knowledge that is stored in the data form or subother form in the repositories. Okay. So, you are going to develop certain models, you are going to frame certain rules for this purpose, okay. And based on these rules and models, you are going to derive some inferences from the data, okay. And for that purpose, we are going to use certain learning tools. Okay. These learning tools are very critical, because if you are going to use them, then you can find out meaning, patterns, okay. You can make predictions also, you can classify the data. So, there are a lot of issues that can be resolved with this, and that is why we are going to use these learning tools, okay. And they are very important, and this can be used for knowledge management. Basically, since the information is available in explicit form, and then you are going to make use of this information to derive certain value for business. So, it is very important that you use certain models and techniques of learning, which is going to be helpful in the process. Now, when we are going to talk about data driven tools, then there are different ways and means through which you can derive inferences. It could be in the description form, where you are going to visualize the data, or you can use statistical tools of software to analyze the data and identify certain patterns and values or trends out of this data. So, it is very important to understand that how we are going to use this concept of learning from data, that is how what you are going to learn out of the data that is available, because your understanding is based on the learning from the data, which you are going to make use in your job to perform certain things more effectively. And in the process, there are 2 things that is very important, that is it is going to help you to communicate and take better decisions. So, suppose the data is available in certain forms, so you are going to organize and classify the data, and based on that you are going to take certain decisions. So, what data is communicating to you is very important, and how you are going to learn certain things from the data based on your inferences, and then take certain decisions, which is going to add value to the business. And that is why learning from the data becomes very important in the process. Now, if you look at learning, what happens in the process of learning, that you get to know about certain things, you have knowledge about certain things, and then you are going to transform that knowledge into action. Okay. So, learning, the basic objective is to see that how knowledge is transformed into action. It means that whatever you have learned by way of experience, either through explicit form or an explicit form through sharing knowledge, that how you are going to use it in order to perform your job. Okay. So, knowledge leads to action would be correct only if you are able to apply that knowledge to perform your job effectively. Okay. And that is how you can validate that knowledge, that yes, the kind of knowledge that is available in the database is correct, and that you are able to use that to transform certain things into a more practical form, and then it is going to help you to take certain decisions related to your work, your job, and other kind of things, right. So, if you look at this concept of learning, it is very, very important, because learning helps you to transform certain things. Okay. It helps you to visualize and understand certain things in a particular way, so that you can decide what is to be done, what not to be done, right, and what kind of decision you are going to take out of it. So, it could be related to decision making, it could be related to productivity, it could be related to performance, right. So, if you look at the major goal of learning, what is that? When you are going to learn something, it means that you are going to acquire knowledge, and this knowledge is going to be acquired either in explicit form or tacit form through different processes, like we talked about in the earlier, like through socialization, internalization, or externalizations. Okay. Depending upon the kind of knowledge that you have gained in the process, either in explicit form or implicit or tacit form, the idea is that you are going to make use of that knowledge to work or apply that in business context, right, and that is the major goal of learning. So, that knowledge that you have gained through the process of learning is going to be useful in business context. Okay. So, that you can perform your job, you can take decisions. Okay. Now, what is the objective of learning from the data is that if you have the data and if you are able to identify certain patterns of the data, okay, this is how the things are moving. Say for example, if you are having data of past 5 years of the productivity trends, okay, these are the productivity of the firm since last 5 years. Okay. Now, this is the data. Now, based on this data, what kind of decisions you are going to take? Are you going to use this data, analyze the data, and then infer something from this data about what are the likely trends which are going to be there for the next year, that is the 6 years. So, at least it will give you a trend, and based on that you will take certain decisions, what kind of actions you want to take. So, it basically helps you to identify trend. Okay. It means based on 5-year data you would be able to predict what is likely to happen in the 6th years, provided the same kind of situation remain, right. That is one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is that you can form certain hypotheses based on the data, that x is related to this. Say for example, if you go for a particular strategy, okay, then it would result in this much profit. Suppose you are going to spend x percentage of your revenue on advertising, then this would relate to y percentage of profit. Now, this x is to be related to the y. So, you make a hypothesis that spending on advertisement would be positively related to sales or revenue from the market. Now, this is a hypothesis which you have developed. Now, you are going to collect data on both the variables, that is spending and advertisement and revenue sales, right. Now, we are going to see that whether this hypothesis is correct or not, and this is based on your previous experience, that those organizations or even your organizations which have been spending more on advertising about the product have been benefited out of it and got better profits or got better sales from the revenue. Now, you are going to examine this hypothesis, okay, and see whether this hypothesis is correct or not. Now, you have data on advertising and you also have data on sales. Now, you can relate both the data and see whether there is a positive correlation between the data or not. So, if there is a positive correlation and find that yes, spending on advertising has really helped the business to make more profits or more sales in the market, then this will help you to take certain decisions, okay, that how much we should spend on advertising in future, right. So, that is the second point. So, you can verify certain hypotheses based on your experience, intuition and knowledge which you have accumulated earlier, and then you collect data on that, and then you can say whether it is correct or not, right. Based on this, then you can predict the future values, trends and behaviors, right. Say for example, you have installed a knowledge management system in the organization. Now, you want to see that what kind of attitude people have about the KM system, what is the use. Okay. Now, installation of KM use, it means that you have made certain investments, okay, in KM system. Now, you want to see that how this investments in KM system is related to use of KM system, and accordingly the change in the behavior of the employees, okay, whether they have become more innovative, okay, whether they are using the knowledge management system frequently or not. So, these kind of behaviors and trends can be identified depending upon the data. So, what you need to do, you need to collect data about how much investments you have made in the knowledge management system, and you can also look into the frequency of use, okay, how many innovative behaviors have been made by the employees, or what kind of suggestions are there, what kind of creative ideas are given by the employees. So, you can relate these two things and can identify, okay, if you are going to invest more in KM system and you have a good KM system, it is going to help employees to be more creative and innovative in the process. The idea is that you can predict certain things based on certain things that you have. So, suppose you have a x variable, that is independent variable, you have y variable. So, whether x is going to predict y or not, that is to be examined, right. And there are a lot of statistical techniques that could be applied to the data, and based on that you can identify whether the trends that is there is going to help you to take certain business decisions, right. For example, suppose you have gone for a particular strategy, okay. Now, you have to see that what is the result of this particular strategy. Once the results are out, you are going to see that in what way that particular strategy is related with the results or outcomes of the organization in terms of effectiveness, productivity. Say for example, you have initiated total quality management program in the organization, right. Now, you can predict the value of this total quality management program by identifying certain criteria in terms of its outcome, okay, in terms of improvement in quality, efficiency and productivity, right. So, if these things are happening, you can say yes, a TQM program is really helping the organization on these criteria, productivity, efficiency and quality. So, you are able to predict certain behaviors based on the data, provided the data is available, okay. So, when we are talking about data and then identifying trends, patterns and values of the data, the basic idea is that you are going to make use of these inferences to make certain business decisions, right. Now, the basic idea is that you are going to validate certain knowledge based on the data, right. When I say that, okay, TQM is related to improved quality of the product, okay, this is a hypothesis that needs to be validated, okay, right. So, we need to validate this knowledge based on the data, okay. So, there are two ways that through which it can be done. One is model validation and the other one is based on the consensus. In case of model validation, what you are going to do? You are going to develop a structure that, okay, this is a TQM and this TQM is related to productivity, efficiency, quality, right. So, say for example, I am going to write or develop a model based on this validation. So, what I am going to write? I am going to make one column and that I am writing TQM. Now, I say this TQM is related to certain things which could be related to productivity, quality, efficiency. Right. So, these are the outcome variables and this is the independent variable. Now, this may also be moderated by the kind of support that you get from the management or the leadership. Okay. Now, this leadership is a variable which is going to moderate the relationship between this TQM and these variables. Now, in the process when you are going to validate this model, what we are going to do? We are going to first implement this total quality management in the organization. We are going to see that what kind of leadership support is available. Then we are going to collect data on productivity in those units or departments where this TQM has been implemented. So, whether there has been significant change in the productivity, quality and efficiency or not. So, what we will do? We will try to relate whether this is due to this total quality management implementation or some other factors, and the extent to which the leadership has been able to support this process, right. So, this is a conceptual model that we have developed. It has a logical structure and then this model has to be operationalized in terms of its measurement. So, we are going to measure it. So, we have two kind of model. One is known as a conceptual model, and then this model needs to be operationalized in terms of measurement, right. So, once this is operationalized, it means that you are going to measure all these variables and then you are going to use certain statistical tool to see whether TQM is able to predict these things or not, and whether there is the interaction of TQM and leadership, right. And this model is to be tested for both, that is we are going to check for internal consistency and you are also going to check for external consistency. Internal consistency is nothing else, but you are going to check the reliability and also the validity. Okay. So, this reliability and validity is to be checked by getting data through observations from the real world in an organization. So, when you are going for model validation, this is the process that you are going to test a logical structure of a conceptual or operational model that is developed here, and then you are going to assess the results for both reliability and validity. Reliability means how consistent the results you are going to get all the time when you are going to implement. Suppose you have implemented TQM. So, whether it is because of TQM or some other factors because of which it has gone, right. So, you are going to check both reliability and validity. So, validity means whether it is really because of TQM or some other factors, and reliability whether it is related to this or not. So, if you use certain statistical technique, then find a positive correlation and think that okay, this is able to explain certain variances in the level of productivity, quality and efficiency, then you can say that yes, this model is validated. Now, this model is to be tested operationally by getting data, whether this data is available in the knowledge management system or whether this data is to be collected from the organization. It depends upon that. Now, it could be both, either you get the data from the system or you collect the data through your observations and then you see whether this model is going to be correct or not. Another way to validate is that you have subject matter experts, a special reference group, and they agree to this point that yes, if you are going to implement TQM, then it would result in these kind of things, but that is more qualitative approach or more subjective. But the first one, that is when you go for model validation through data, then it is a more quantitative approach, right. Now, it could be done in two ways, that is top down, either you have derived a hypothesis from your observation, okay, and our prior knowledge that you generate idea that okay, if you are going to implement this, then it is likely to happen, or bottom up, do not test any hypothesis, you simply go for TQM and then see what happens, right. So, both kind of things can be done, and this is known as top down approach or bottom up approach. So, both kind of things are possible. Another way to look at it is data visualization. Now, when you are going to explore data, it means that you can also look visually what kind of trends are coming up. Okay. So, it could be a graphic representation. For example, it could be related to a particular attribute of a task and the way it is changing. So, you can see that how a particular distribution key attributes is being distributed across the people or group, right. And you can also identify outliers. Say for example, if you are going to collect data about the use of KM system across different functional. Now, you have HR, you have finance, you have system department, you have R&D, you have marketing, you have production. So, these are the different functional areas which are going to use the KM system. So, this is one attribute which we are looking at, that use of KM system across different functional areas. Now, you have to see that how much use is there in terms of quality, frequency, other kind of things, and then you simply, if you put a graph like this. So, this is basically a visual representation, right, correct. And then you can see that on an average various departments are going to use the KM system. So, this basically talks about one particular attribute, that is use of KM system across different groups. And then you can predict this is how they are likely to predict in the future. Another important issue is identifying the outliers. Maybe other departments are using this way, but one particular department you find that production department or say R&D department is using in this way. So, this becomes the outlier. Outliers are those points basically which does not fall within the ambit of the average, right. Say for example, if in a test the score of average score of the student average score falls between say 45 to 75, right. Now, but one student has got 95, right. So, it means this becomes an outlier, because it is going to influence the average of this. So, this is known as outlier, because it is out of the expected range. This is the expected range, and this score is an outlier, right. So, we can also identify the outliers, and then we can develop our hypothesis, and then we see that what kind of predictive measures we are going to use. Predictive measures means what kind of tools and techniques that you are going to use in terms of statistics and other things, with the help of which you are going to make certain predictions. And then you can also extract interesting group data for further investigation. Suppose you have this kind of data, then you can see that, say for example, you have this kind of data. This is the data which you have extracted. Now, you can see that how different groups are reacting to the KM system. You can also get feedback about the KM system from the different groups, right, and then see that what is the reason for using or not using a KM system by the different groups. So, you can further investigate it and get their feedback from this, right. So, this is about data visualization, and we are moving to next part where neural networks are being used as learning models, right. Neural networks basically are simulated based on the human brain network, but there is a difference, because the basic idea is that you are using technology to simulate brain, and basically the brain which processes biological informations, and it has a massive networks, and these networks are connected through this is known as neurons. So, the idea is taken from there, but these neural networks are computers, and computers are different, because neural networks do not evolve for a period of time in the human being, but in computers it is more static, right. And these neural nets are not digital or serial, but they are analog or parallel, because you can learn through examples. They are not programmed rules for the human brain, instructions. And digital computers, whatever configurations you have, they work on the basis of that. They do not evolve over a period of time. Now, if you look at these neurons, the idea has been taken from the human brain, okay, and then you have inputs, okay, then you go for transformation of these inputs, okay, and then you come out with a transfer function. So, that is what we call a threshold function. Okay. So, if the sum is greater than the threshold, it means that the neuron fires. It means that it is stimulated and then it is going to act, right. Then you have interconnections among the various neurons, okay, and then there are nodes through which these neurons are interconnected. Let us see how they are connected through this. Look at this. Okay. This is a model for a neural network. You can see that there are various inputs. You can see the various inputs. These are various inputs which are acting as stimulators. Then these are the the connections are known as synaptic strands. These are synaptic connections, and these are the various weights, and this is where the transformation takes place. Okay. This is nothing else, the weighted sum of inputs, that how much stimulation is there and whether it is able to fire or not, and firing depends upon the weight of sum of the weights of these inputs, and this transfer function is dependent on what you call the output, is nothing else but the sum of inputs that you have multiplied by the weights, and then you go for calculating whether it is going to fire or not. The idea is to understand that whether you are getting inputs in the form of neurons and whether it is able to connect it or not, and whether it is going to help you to take certain decisions or not. Now, related to that, there are two kind of learning that happens in neural networks. One is known as supervised learning and the other one known as unsupervised learning. So, in a supervised learning process, what happens? There is a teacher and there is a training set of examples through which you are going to learn the process, okay, and each element is an input, okay, and then you also expect certain output which is desired after you have gone through those inputs, right. These inputs are processed by you and then you have come out with certain outputs. Now, you have these networks, okay, which regularly passes through the examples and weights that is adjusted towards the goal. Now, the network has learned to associate a set of input patterns with a specific output. So, if you are going to do this, this is going to happen, right. It means there is a direct combination between the inputs and the specific output. It depends whether the inputs have been able to stimulate you to fire and come out with certain outputs or not, right. For example, suppose you are sleeping and then suddenly you hear a sound bang, right. What happens? It's an input which is strong enough to wake you up, right. So, similarly, so this is a cause and effect relationship. Similarly, you have to see that what kind of inputs are there, what is how the way it is being transferred, and what is the output for the people. Now, one example that I have taken from this source is that how we are going to predict whether the firm is going to bankrupt or not using the neural network model, supervised neural network model basically. Now, see the number of variables that we have taken here include what is the networking or the capital or the total assets, then what is the retained earning, then earning before income tax, then market value, what is the market value, sales and total assets. Now, if you look these variables, okay, these are the input units, and then from there you are getting these units, right. So, they are interconnected. These are known as nodes, and see all of them are interconnected. Okay. So, now if you look at this and then based on this you are coming out with the output. The output is that whether you are whether you are going to save yourself or whether you are going to bankrupt, right. Whether it is going to be solvency or whether it is going to be bankruptcy, right. So, these are the variables which are going to decide. So, what you will do, you are going to collect data on these variables, process them, and based on that you are going to take decisions which could be in the form of either solvency or bankruptcy of the firm, right. Now, in case of unsupervised learning, what happens that it is basically self organized, because there is no external factors, influence adjustments for the input weight, and even if you look at neural network, it does not have any indication whether the answer is correct or not correct. So, basically it depends upon how you are going to say it, okay, because you are going to have direct confrontation with the new experience, and it depends upon you how you are going to organize the things. It is, see, if you look at this, it is very much organized, and you can identify the nodes and the networks that is connected at different levels and then output, but in this case it is based on your experience and learning, okay, and that is what we know as self supervised. Now, since we have talked about learning and neural network models for learning, the next thing is that we have to see that whether you are able to apply it in the context of business or not, right. So, it has been applied in different contexts, okay, where you want to recognize certain patterns based on the data, okay, and it could be applied in any kind of sector, okay. And you of late we find that a lot of organizations or businesses have been able to use neural networks to take certain take it forward and make certain decisions based on that. Okay, thank you.